Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Hi.
Just going to get you all to come in. Okay, super. So, good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. We are going to be recording this webinar so we can share the slides for anyone that wants to recap or anybody that missed it today. And we'll pop it on the portal as usual on our YouTube channel. Delighted to be joined by Alan Davies from Wind Services again. Good morning, Alan.
Morning, everyone. Morning, Hannah.
Morning. So you might remember Alan from one of our very first COVID-related webinars that we did last year. I think it was about April time. It was quite early on into lockdown. And we got some really great feedback. We kind of, Alan and I have known each other for a long time, so we tend to have a bit of a chat through these webinars. So Alan's got some slides to go through, but we'll also open it up. We'd love you to be as interactive as you want. If you want to raise your hand, I can unmute you. We'd love to hear from you and have a little bit of a discussion, ask questions, come and talk to us during this session, during this forum, or use the chat function or the Q&A to make the most of it and find out how you can open the office back up again. Let's share each other's stories and lessons learned, and you know, it'd be great to hear from you as much as you feel comfortable to during this session. Before we do any of that, I've got some polls to share because we want to know just a little bit more about you and what you did in relation to COVID in your office last year. So I'm going to launch these now. Alan, I'm going to let us vote on them as well. So they should be on your screen. I'll give it a couple of minutes for everybody to answer those, and then I'll share the results. So the first question is, did you open back up at all in 2020? So you've got, can anybody see it? I haven't seen any votes come in yet.
Yeah.
You can see it, yeah. So did you open back up in 2020? Oh, here we go. Yes, no, or only for staff who couldn't work from home. How ready do you feel for the next opening, as and when that might be? Fully prepared, somewhat prepared, underprepared, or unsure? And have you completed your COVID risk assessment and reviewed it lately? Because this is the thing that we need to keep up to date. Yes, but not reviewed recently. Yes, and recently reviewed, or no. So let us know. Most of us have done that now. A couple more to go. Perfect. There we go. 100%. So that's super. So that will give us a really good idea of where you're at as well. And again, you know, it'd be great to hear more from you on some of these topics as conversation starters. So I'm going to share the results and go through them very briefly. So it's a bit of a 50-50 split here with people opening up. A couple of you didn't, but most of you either did or only for those who couldn't work from home, which is completely understandable. I think for my business that I work in part-time as ops manager, we were the same. We opened in September time and closed again at the end of December. How ready do you feel? But we've remained open for 2 staff the whole time who just can't work from home because they're in tiny apartments in London. How ready do you feel for the next opening? Some of you fully prepared, that's really good to see. Somewhat prepared, great. Underprepared, that's completely understandable. And there's probably some imposter syndrome and things kicking in there because it's just like, and everything's confusing with advice. But hopefully Alan will shed some light on some of that today and help you feel much more confident about this. And a few of you are unsure. And then most of you have completed your risk assessment. A couple have reviewed recently, and then most haven't, and a few of you haven't done it at all. So again, we can try and help with that perhaps on today's session as well. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to the wonderful Alan. So as I say, feel free to use the chat, pop some Q&As in, ask to unmute, raise your hand if you want to, make it as useful for you as you can. And Alan, over to you, my lovely.
Thank you, Hannah, once again. And I just want to reiterate what a great job Hannah's done and her team during this time, and the support she's given us, and people like myself as well as a supplier. She's got a great work ethic, and I think that's reflected in her support that she's given to people and the time that she's put into this. So thanks, Hannah. I really mean.
Do you know, I'm actually crying. My God, Alan. Oh, you can't do that to me when I've had like 4 hours sleep overnight.
That's,
Thank you, that's very kind.
that's anyway, this moving on swiftly.
Yeah.
This is an open forum, as Hannah said. It's not designed to say how wonderful I am or anything like that, or my company. It's to engage. We're all part of the OMP team, and as we're all learning fast from this. I mean, it's we're all adapting to the challenges that we've had for the last 12 months and the challenges ahead. And what a challenging 12 months it has been, not only for the workplace, but the mental well-being of people, their physical health, and it impacts on all of us, including your fellow work colleagues, and as office managers, PAs, whatever your job role is, you're here because you manage a working environment, and you're responsible for a lot of people, but you're effectively, your role's increased because you've taken on more responsibility, not only just for the managing of COVID, but the mental well-being and physical well-being of staff has taken on a completely new dimension. So it is quite, I don't want to make it sound as though all the responsibility and the burden's on your shoulders, but you know, it has changed, and I recognise that, and the people that you work with, I'm sure do too, but also the suppliers that you rely on and work with, they've got the additional responsibility to support you. So I wanted to start with that because that's quite important. We move on to the next slide. The objective, I mean, what is the challenge? Well, that's quite simple, really. If you take it down to brass tacks, it's to stop and reduce the spread of COVID-19, the infection. And the great news is the vaccine. The UK have been fantastic in rolling out the vaccine, way ahead of most people. I think we're third in the league table of the rollout, which is absolutely fantastic when you consider against Israel, I know, are leading the way. They've got, I think, only 3 or 4 million people population. We've got 65 million. So I think it's a fantastic achievement. So it brings me to the objective. And the objective for you, for me, for people around you is to create a safe working environment and make sure that the workplace is COVID-19 secure. And you need to roll that out within your work and your support function. And to assist your staff to be able to return safely, there's things like coordinating with your HR and the mental well-being of everything. And as I said earlier, it's a completely new role, really, on top of what you're already doing. So hats off to you all. Hats off to you all. So if we can go on to the next slide. Phase 1, evaluate. I mean, let's look at what we're looking at here to evaluate this. There are only 2 ways to transmit COVID-19. So again, coming back to basics, to first of all, before we move forward and how we manage this, we need to understand it. And I'm sure you will do anyway, but I'm just reiterating this really. It's either person to person through contact, or it's from surfaces. So they're the 2 areas that you can contact that. We all know that by now. I'm sure we've heard enough on it through the government, on television and this, that and the other. On the surfaces, it seems that it's more resistant to going away, really. So on natural surfaces, it's even up to a week on wood and stuff like that. But on man-made surfaces, it can last even longer. The testing on it is not totally conclusive, but they do all agree, all the people that have been looking at this, that this virus hangs around a lot longer than a common flu-like virus. So we've got to look at mitigating the risk. And things we need to consider when we're looking at this is your actual demise, where you work first of all. And I'm sure most of you have done this, because as Hannah just alluded to when she'd done that survey, but I'll go through it anyway. So forgive me if I do repeat things that have already been said, but they're obvious things. But are you in a shared building? Do you have your own building? because if you're in a shared building, there's the landlord had his own protocol, and you need to work closely with the landlord. Of course, one of the massive challenges now, I mean, I'm sure some of you have seen who work in London, the massive building 22 Bishopsgate, massive building, and they've got, I think, from memory, I think they've got 8 lifts to get thousands of people to their workplace, to each floor. Now that is a massive challenge, and I think even in a building where you've got 4 floors with 2 lifts, it's going to be a challenge. So that's got to be managed, whether that's through the landlord, yourselves, or whatever. So access to your actual demise is a massive challenge, and working with your landlord. Of course, social distancing. Once you're in the building, how you're going to manage that, one-way systems and such like. But of course, if you've got restricted space, then you've got restricted access and one-way systems, and social distancing can then be quite a challenge. Making sure you've got enough stock of PPE, sanitizing products and such like. Again, liaising maybe with the landlord if you're not responsible for things like common areas and washrooms, for example. And of course, transport to work is something that needs to be considered for your staff. I mean, we have a couple of clients that are in the trading sector, and they've got a lot of money, of course, but they don't take the risk. And what they do is they arrange taxis from their door to door. That's not always possible, I know, but that's an extreme example, but you still need to be mindful of that. And of course, then the cleaning requirements. Most people have a cleaning regime before this, which was most probably a standard schedule based on your requirements, the size of the building, number of people, etc., type of work you do. But of course, that's now needed. That needs to be enhanced with the cleaning of touch points, surfaces, enhanced hygiene practices and stuff like that. And of course, then access control. How do you control the site when people come to your reception or whatever it is? You need to be mindful of how that's being managed as well.
Okay. Alan, just on the cleaning schedule, sorry, I've got the video off because Noah's woken up. Just on the cleaning schedule, I mean, do you think that this might be something that's called into evidence, right? So if there's an outbreak that's unreasonable of the company, and the HSE, so the health and safety executives, say, do you know what, we want to see evidence of your schedule and how you've been controlling that. I mean, do you think that's something that they might consider looking at to make sure that there was a suitable, appropriate schedule in place, which should have been considered on someone's risk assessment anyway, but also then that there's evidence that that is being reviewed and monitored, which is part of normal health and safety procedures with risk assessments anyway?
Yeah, without a doubt. I think it'll be the first place they will look, and evidence of work that's been carried out. I mean, just on, for example, when there's an outbreak or a suspected outbreak, then you should be able to demonstrate that you've taken all reasonable precaution. And of course, the first point of call for anything like that is a risk assessment and what measures you've put in place. So it's something as simple as updating the cleaning schedule from 12 months ago to now. And it could be some simple things like the enhanced cleaning measures, the touch points, the emphasis on touch points and surfaces. So yeah, it's a good question, and without a doubt that will be an integral part of any evaluation when it comes to outbreaks. And let's face it, we're still in the unknown, and lots of people are going to be very nervous about that.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point on that, because I think we talked about that last year, right? Is the impression and the perception that you're giving to your clients and your colleagues, your staff. So being able to present a thorough cleaning schedule that has monitoring and management and audits in place is going to be really key. So yeah, it's a good point. Okay.
So, I mean, that sort of conveniently brings me on to phase 2, really, which is the delivery of the measures that you've identified. And basically, what you need to start with is a Bible. I call it a Bible. In security, they call it assignment instructions. So there's a go-to place that everybody has, and that's available to everybody, and everybody should be aware of it, not just yourselves, but your staff, and knowing what's expected of them, how they should behave in terms of their work practices whilst on site. So yeah, that's a great place to start, and it works hand in glove with what Hannah's just said, really. But then you've got to look at who's going to manage it, how that's going to be implemented, of course, what resources you have in place already. You may be someone that's looking after the whole shebang, but you do need support on this. And you need to look at things like your stock levels in terms of PPE and stuff like that. You need to look at your health monitoring. We'll come on to that in a minute, and your staffing, so that's an ongoing part of this. Health passports, they call it, some people, but we will come on to that. And most of you are doing this already, because, as we all know, we've had 12 months of this, and we've locked down twice, most probably, I think it is, and backwards and forwards, and it's been very difficult. But certainly we've all had to learn fast, and I'm sure most of you have got your practices and your delivery methods in place, but it needs to be said. But what I would emphasize is you do need a risk assessment carried out on the delivery. You do need your Bible, what to do, when to do it, how to do it, and share that with staff. And so be supported. Don't be frightened to ask people to be marshals. You have first aid marshals. You really need, for every 12 staff, I would say, an additional marshal or someone who's trained, has a toolbox training on this and can support you, because you can't be everywhere, and it does need that, Okay, that's that one. There we go. I think that was page 4, wasn't it? Yeah. Right. Phase 3, communication. How will we do this effectively? It's all right talking about everything, talking about how, you've got your Bible, you've got whatever you want to call it, you've worked out how you're going to deliver it, and you've got to then make sure that you communicate this, because it can only be effective if everybody's buying into it. Your staff, visitors understand it, because eventually we'll have visitors on site, we will have suppliers turning up, and all these sort of things. So the communication process is vital. It's a reassurance as well for staff that are coming in, knowing that they've got all this information, and people do need that mental reassurance. So how would you do that? Well, the obvious one is email, regular email. Don't apologise for the amount of emails you do. Toolbox training with staff, making sure that they're aware of what's expected of them when it's sanitising, making sure you're aware of what they're doing. Again, I'll come on to health passports, whether they've had vaccination, this, that and the other. Engaging marshals, having additional support within your workforce, and making sure that, some people do 24-hour shifts. I know a lot of offices don't necessarily, but there are people that have 24-hour shifts, they have IT and things like that. So you need to make sure that if you're not there, things still work, things still get communicated, things still get delivered. And the only way you can do that is appoint marshals, or, of course, if you outsource your cleaning, or if you outsource security, or if you need to work with the landlord, ensure that the communication process is ongoing, and you work and liaise with them, and they support that. And of course, surveys. I mean, we've done a survey. Well, Hannah just did a survey. That's a great thing. Communicating with staff, getting their feedback. Surveys are fantastic. Just simple surveys, and not only about the workplace, but people's mental well-being as well, and how they're feeling, and people appreciate that. And yeah, as I said earlier, just roll it out to your contract. Don't forget your contractors, because a lot of people, they'll have hard FM, soft FM, they'll have people coming in to support them doing various things. Make sure you engage with them and they understand what's expected of them. as well. And again, if you have cleaners in, they're often out of hours, so they need to be aware what they need to do and engage and conform. Okay, so next slide, please.
We've had a question.
Oh, sorry, I'm not very good.
Don't worry, it's okay. It's well, it's more of a discussion point, really. So if everybody knows how to use the raise hand function, it'd be great to hear, because someone's asked, is anybody planning on using a temperature thermometer that staff need to use before entering the office? So is anyone taking temperatures or planning on doing that? So raise your hands or pop in the chat to hear on that one. It'd be great to hear from you and find out who is planning on that. And Alan, maybe give us your take on it as well.
Okay. Is anyone planning on using temperature thermometer that staff need to use before entering the office? Yeah, I'll come on to that if I may, because I've got a slide on that of what.
Perfect.
Yeah. So is that okay on that one?
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you.
Right. Let me just get rid of that question then, because it's on my screen. Right. Okay. Right. Okay. Right. Testing. I believe that this will become the norm, whether carried out in-house or by a third party. And the factors moving forward will be what industry you're in. If you're in an office environment, then it won't be as key maybe as someone that's in what I call a key working environment, NHS or medical environment. It could be a food factory, it could be something like that, where it would need to be more robust. The cost, of course, is vital. I'll come on to that, because we have clients that actually do testing, and we have to use nurses to do it. I'll come on to that a bit later. So, and of course, if you're an office manager that's got 30 staff, you can't justify that sort of thing, but you can still put robust measures in. But there is that to consider. You need the cooperation of your staff as well for testing. They need to buy into it and ensure that they understand it as well. And of course, it's got to be a robust system, as robust as you can make it anyway. So that's quite important as well. You may have heard of lateral flow tests, antigen testing. I believe that will become an integral part of testing moving forward. Of course, at the moment, up until recently, you could go and get a test if you felt that you had a high temperature or whatever, and you went to a COVID test centre. That's now being flowed out and to the private sector, so that there are tests available to get for offices or for employers to use locally on site. And I'll come on to what we do as a company. I'm talking about us in our own office now, not what we do out with our clients in a minute. So yeah, testing is going to be important. Now, coming to testing, you may have heard of ATP testing, which is where you send it off to a lab to see if you've got any contagion on surfaces. To be honest, that's really for bacteria. With COVID-19, it's a virus, it's a protein, so it can't really be tested like that. There are tests available, but they take days to actually get the results of, and they're quite costly. So there are ways you can check, and I think the best way of doing it is just checking your people and making sure you've got robust cleaning measures in place to ensure that the environment that your staff are working in is as safe as possible. So I wouldn't go that far. I think that I know that there are big companies that have gone down that route, but I think if it's a knee-jerk thing, I think if you've got the resources within your company, and the lateral flow tests are a good addition to the temperature checks and stuff like that, which I'll come on to in a minute. So we can move on from that one, Hannah. Phase 5, health part. Right, you may have heard of health passports and such like. And basically what we're talking about really is something that make sure that the well-being of staff are captured, and you have that information captured it on your PC through some sort of medium, like a health passport through an app of some sort. You can create one in-house, which are very straightforward, and just as you can see on the screen, focus on the well-being of the staff, their travel to work, their obviously their shift rotas, especially if it's 24-hour, their status, their COVID status. As I said, you can create something yourself in-house. There are things that you can get on websites and such like now, or you can outsource it. But again, I'll come back to the fact that to outsource is a costly measure. We have, in my particular company, we have commercial companies in London, and most of those are just restricted at the moment, but some of them are working, and whilst we don't provide this type of service, a health passport, they do that themselves. We're doing the electrostatic to supplement that, and every month we go in and do the electrostatic spraying, and it just means that it's an additional measure, and they have that on their collective health passport. But we also have clients like Balfour, BT and Morgan Sindall, where, as I mentioned earlier, they bring in a nurse and they do all the lateral flow testing. They come in on a sort of 4-hour shift, and it's not cheap but they've got about 400 or 500 people that get tested before the shift starts, and it works quite like that. So if I can give you an example of what we do at our office, though, which hopefully you can relate to. I mean, our office in near Southend, not far from where Hannah lives, actually, is 1,800 square foot. So it's not big. It's an open plan office. We have 2 meeting rooms, 16 desks, reception area, breakfast area, breakout area, sorry, not breakfast area. It's a shared building, so you have to come in at reception, go up on a lift, or use the stairs if you want to get your steps up on your daily count. And we provide daily cleaning. We happen to do it ourselves for obvious reasons. We also do the common areas, and all we've done is we've got our daily cleaning plus our enhanced cleaning with the touch points and sanitizing, which is done after all the cleaning is done, and that's the last thing they do. And they use a virucidal cleaner called Zuno. I mean, most things work. If it's even neutral detergent can kill it, but we use Zuno. We typically have 6 staff in at the moment at a time. They're key workers, and the occasional director will come in, and maybe the odd manager. Most of the field support are out remotely. But what I'm really driving at is how do we control our office? Well, first of all, once they get to reception, they come in and they have to sign in to a log. Sorry, no, they don't do that. That's the third thing they do. The first thing they do is we take their temperature. We've got one of those zappers, like I'm sure most of you have got now. Take their temperature. If that's okay, they sanitize their hands, and then they sign in the logbook. So that's our thing. And once a week, to supplement that, once a week, we do a lateral flow test. So we use one of these local kits, whack it up the nose and stuff like that. And that's self-administered by the staff. They do that once a week, and we keep a log of that. And then the only other thing we do, we do our own electrostatic of the office at weekend or first thing Monday morning. So that's what we do as a company, to give you, to relate to maybe some of the size of businesses that you manage as well. So, and we find that that's robust for what we do as a company. Is that okay, Hannah?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, there's some good discussions going on the chat about temperature check. So some people do it, some people don't.
Yeah, I think it's just a simple thing to do, isn't it? Boom, you've done it. It's so easy.
Yeah. I mean, there was a comment which I agree with. It's someone could have a temperature for many reasons, right? And if anybody wants to jump in here and add anything and be heard, then just raise your hand and let me know, and I'll unmute you. But yeah, someone can have a temperature for many reasons, right? My son's had one recently because he was teething and all this kind of stuff. Not that adults get teething, issues anymore, but
no.
But yeah, it's true. But I suppose we were saying this last year, I think, in a lot of our webinars, is every piece, every building block that you can put in place to quash the risk of the spread counts for something. And that's all the stuff that the government and the health and safety exec are expecting you to be able to prove as well. So not necessarily having to do temperature tests and checks, but having some form of mechanism in place, to evidence and to show that you are managing this and you're mitigating it and you're reducing that risk. So yeah, temperature tests aren't going to be the be all and end all, but it is one of those small steps to doing something and pushing it somewhere. We've heard about the new strain and that some people have 0 symptoms. So that doesn't mean that if someone's not got a temperature, you're not bringing or allowing someone, permitting someone into your office that doesn't have COVID. So, and I think even with the lateral flow test, and I know you're going to talk about these a bit more, but there's some stats, aren't there, that they are only so accurate and all this kind of stuff. But again, they're another step, and it's all about a big net, right? You've got a big net, and you're pushing people through that net as part of this process. And in that net are your various means of tests, checks, reminders, procedures, where you have social distancing in place, cleaning in place, the temperature checks, the lateral flow checks, signage, shift patterns, all the things, screens, if you put screens up, all these things are your net, and you're just trying to catch as many people in that as possible to stop those who have it going through.
It's just mitigating risk, that's all it is. And these they're not 100% foolproof, of course not, but if you put them all together as a collective, you're taking every reasonable precaution to deliver a safe working environment. It's as simple as that. I noticed someone put on why Zuno on the chat list. We did some research back in March, April on what we felt was a suitable product that we would use to roll out. And we use Zuno because we find it's an effective virucidal cleaner, but also we use it in our electrostatic spraying as well, because we stick it through one of those backpacks and it just comes out at 40 microns and it positively charges it and creates a barrier to the surfaces and touch points. Again, not 100%, but it's just another measure that we take. And I have to say, coming back to the people that we do work for, and one of your suppliers, fellow cleaning company, Hannah, Radiance, we work with, and they've got a number of high-end clients in the financial sector, trading, and as much as anything, for their peace of mind, for their staff, we go in and do the electrostatic. They, again, I will emphasize that these people are, earn shed loads of money. These traders,
rolling in it.
So it's a bit different from some, most of us couldn't justify that, but certainly they can. And it's a mental well-being thing, and they get a certificate afterwards. And again, it's all this, if someone came and did a check and there was an outbreak, you can show them, well, look, we've done this, we've done that, and we've mitigated the risk as best we can with the resources available to us in the current circumstances.
Because it's that reasonably practicable balance as well, right? So the HSE isn't going to expect, if you don't have the money as a company, they're not going to expect you to do electrostatic cleaning every day, every week, whatever, because if it's unjustifiable in terms of the cost versus your profits and your revenue, you use other methods and other ways to mitigate that risk. They're not saying, yes, you have to spend all this money, because it's not cheap, and it's certainly not cheap to do it on that sort of basis. But it's another thing to add to your net. So if your company can do it, they're paying millions and millions of pounds in bonuses and they want their staff to be in the office, they probably should be doing it as another method to catch that in the net. So it's all about your options versus what's reasonable on balance. And what can you put in that net to really catch and funnel out that virus.
Okay.
Next slide, Alan.
Yeah, please.
Oh, sorry, I keep going too far.
I mean, this is just a little bit, and this is just an example of what you can do. It's very technical, and I'm not going to get into this, but as a company, we use I can never say it. It's the Arthur sword, Excalibur, EXCALI. Anyway, doesn't matter what one it is, I suppose, but that's the one we use. And we use that, as I mentioned before, at Balfour and Morgan Sindall and places like that, where they have key working, essential working, and they have to be open. And we use that for our test, track and trace. And at those sites, they have a professional nurse come in. You don't need to be there. And there is a website or a YouTube site, and there isn't there, that you can look at for lateral flow testing if you just wanted to get an idea of it.
Do you want me to share the link in the chat, Alan, now?
Oh, please, yeah.
Yeah, this is the link, everyone, that Alan's talking about in the chat now.
It has nothing to do with us. It's just, I just think it's a very basic understanding of what's expected if you decided as a company to bring these lateral flow tests in, how they work in a very basic way. And it's a 7-minute idiot's guide, if you like, and I'm an idiot, so I'll need to know how to administer them, how to use them. They're self-administered anyway, but they come as a kit. Loads of people are going to do them. You just want a company that are, you know, you can trust and know that they're authorised. And this company have got quite a good name, so we looked at a number of companies and they seem to be okay. So we run with these people.
Alan, just while we've got a little pause there, so somebody's asked, my company doesn't do temperature tests, despite some staff asking that they set it up. Is there any legal or government advice that says companies should do it?
No, not at the moment. No. I think it just comes back to, to me personally, having one of these temperature checks at reception, and just then saying to somebody, look, can you just engage, it could be a marshal, could be the security officer, could be a receptionist, just take someone's, it's very simple. I mean, I can't imagine people being resistant to that. And it's just a very basic measure to take, isn't it? Really? Yeah. So why not do it?
I mean, yeah, like Alan said, there's no legal requirement either from the HSE or the government in legislation on either side about having to do this. I think if we go back to that, and I haven't looked at it for a while, actually, I must confess, but the document where they talk about centres and offices and this kind of stuff, dogs barking right on cue, where they give a good guide to doing the risk assessment. And sorry, just one second, I'm just going to mute actually. And yeah, they give a good guide to doing a risk assessment and things to consider. And a risk assessment is always, regardless of COVID, right, we should all have a risk assessment in place if we've got 5 or more staff in our offices. And a risk assessment is always about taking that hazard and the potential for harm and trying to push that risk down. So in the case of COVID, like we've talked about, it's, okay, well, there's a spread of a disease here, which can be deadly, right? It can be fatal. So the risk of it at the moment and the chance of it happening, I can't think what it's called, the risk and whatever, the chance of it happening, isn't it? The, what's it called? Whatever, think of it in a sec. Are quite high, right? Likelihood, thank you very much, that's the one. Yeah, you can tell I've had 4 hours sleep. So the likelihood is high at the moment, right? Because it's undetectable in some people, etc., etc. I mean, we're in lockdown, so the chances are going down, but it's still high. So you would need to consider that, and then what steps. There's no one simple answer to this, and there never is on generally any risk assessments with any hazards in your office. Like take manual handling, for example. Alan's cleaning staff do manual handling a lot with hoovers and cleaning products, moving boxes around for toilet rolls and so on and so forth, right? So he has to make sure that they are trained suitably, that that's monitored, that they can lighten the load where possible, that they don't have to take hoovers up and down stairs, and that they use alternative measures, or they have a Hoover on each floor, all these kind of things. There's not just ever, with risk assessments and the hazards, one simple solution to push that risk down or get rid of it. So it's the same with COVID. The temperature testing has been suggested because it's one of the 3 main symptoms that they discovered in the early days, which could detect it. So yeah, there's no legal requirement, but as Alan said, if your company's got the money, and you're looking at a couple of £100 for one of the laser ones that you can do at a social distance. If you're looking at opening back up and you want to give, particularly if your staff are asking for it, I would say to give them that assurance, even if other people in your company don't really mind or care, to give those handful of people that are asking for it that assurance and that comfort blanket to know, right, okay, they're doing something here, because it's all about that perception we talked about in the last session. I would probably just do it and put something in place. That's my take. Has anyone else got any comments on it or want to chat about that? Or Alan, anything else to add? No. Raise your hand if you want to add anything in. Someone's just said, please can you look into potential legal complications regarding temperature checks in the office? I'm not sure what you mean by that, but I'll chat to you separately and see. Okay, do you want the next slide, Alan? Or
yes, please. Sorry, yeah.
Sorry.
That's all right. Yeah, I mean, finally, control. I mean, all what we've discussed has to be monitored, has to be controlled. So who, how, and what, really. So who's going to do this? Who's going to be appointed to do this? Will it be key staff within your organisation, security officers? How will it be done? So that will be through all the risk assessments that you've carried out and stuff like that. So that needs to be, this is almost a summary now really, but recovery plans on outbreaks or incidents, how you're going to deal with those. So for example, a suspected COVID outbreak, what is your protocol? What are you going to do? Obviously someone that has got high temperature immediately goes home, they isolate, and they have a guide to follow from you. I mean, don't get me wrong, the government do all this as well, but I think it's important that you implement and just sort of reiterate that in your own protocols. If there's an outbreak, a general outbreak, what do you do then? Do you close the office? Do you immediately bring in your cleaning team? Do you electrostatic fog, whatever process you may use? And of course, testing. How will you implement testing and look at using that as an integral part of your control measures? I think moving forward, this will happen personally. I think a lot of businesses will do that. I think, for example, entertainment, media, theatres, cinemas, they may well have some form of control measure in place for people that come in, and they may even, and I don't know the league, again, don't ask me this because I don't know the answer, I've got a feeling that people will start saying, have you been vaccinated, to people when they go to, for example, the cinema. And I think that'll open a whole new can of worms, because that really does then become a different discussion really. And I've seen some articles on this. I can understand it, but at the same time, it's a little bit slippery area really, dodgy ground. So yeah, it's something that needs to be looked at, and how that will be rolled out. I think we're at the stage at the moment where we've got the vaccinations rolling out quite well. The testing side of things has not been really, we've not got to the stage where like we were 6 months ago about closing down, lockdown. The testing, I think, is something that's going to be rolled out generally in the next couple of months. So I would say watch this space really on that, but just be aware of it. Okay. Next slide, yeah. And finally, the ongoing Wheel of Fortune is going to be here for a while. It's not going away. whether in our workplace, whether in travel, whether in our personal life. This is going to be with us now. And the virus doesn't hide away. Even if we go on lockdown, it will be here to stay. Fortunately, now we've got the vaccine so that we can control this. But this is no different to a flu. It's a virus. And so you can only manage it like the flu. And so every year there will be a vaccination available to people. And of course, viruses, like all viruses, well, COVID, like all viruses, mutates, and it will mutate and it will change. And that's not going to, that will happen. And the good thing is now with the vaccine and all the work that's gone into it, they can adapt the vaccines quite easily each year, each season. So I think by the next winter, there will be another mutation and we will need to adapt the vaccine. But this will be with us for the foreseeable future, and our way of life will never be quite the same again, certainly within our generation, because it will be in our mindsets. But I'll tell you one thing, next year, flu, colds, they'll reduce because people's personal hygiene will have improved generally across the board. So you'll find, I think, next year that the outbreaks of flu and colds and stuff, people will just be more mindful, even for their relatives, their elder relatives, where before we'd go and see our grandparents and do this, do that. We'll be more mindful of that. So I think everyone will be more cautious. So I think long term, although you can't see it at the moment, there'll be a lot of benefits from this.
It's funny because I was thinking, sorry, Alan, I was thinking this morning, actually, it'd be interesting to know, and I don't know if there's stats out there already on it, but it'd be interesting to know if things like, there's a huge percentage of people that unfortunately pass away because of the flu each year and influenza, and it'd be interesting to know if any of that has come down as a result of the lockdowns and the social distancing and the improved hygiene. So yeah, I fully agree. It'd be interesting to see what happens with those areas.
Yeah. Okay. Well, just to summarise, I mean, COVID secure, that's your workplace. That moves around to making sure that you're monitoring and controlling and you have those measures in place. Keep communicating by email, having marshals in place, signage and stuff like that. And then, of course, the well-being. People are any business's greatest asset. Companies don't exist. You can't touch them. You can't feel them. They don't die. They don't have illnesses. People do. And people are the people that run businesses. So look after your people, make sure they're well-being. If I can just finish with one of my clients is called Arab, and what they're doing, they're assessing the mental well-being of their staff, and anyone who's struggling are going to be prioritised in returning to work. So it could be that they're going through personal issues at work, at home. It could be they live on their own. It could be they're having problems domestically. And they're assessing all that, and their priority, as much as anything, obviously they've got their key workers that need to be in and all the support staff like their security and cleaning, but they are looking at prioritising them, and so they've got a massive thrust on the mental well-being of their staff, and I think that's commendable. And I think all companies should be looking at that, because it's a lot cheaper to keep the good people you've already got than to lose them. And also the well-being of these people. It's been a traumatic time for everybody, and hopefully most companies recognise that and see it through. So to conclude, moving forward, I believe that these measures will be a norm for a generation, and we'll have to balance this as a society with opening up the mental well-being of people, the physical well-being of people, the economy and education. All these things are very difficult to balance, and I don't envy any government that's in place, really. Great news about the vaccine. It can, we can adapt that now as we roll it out. Once we've got 70% of the population vaccinated, herd immunity and things like that, vastly reduce the spread anyway. And as I said earlier, common cold, flu, I think, will reduce as personal hygiene's improved. Don't mean that disparately, but yeah. But anyway, thank you very much. I've rabbited on long enough. So back to you, Hannah.
I don't think that's rabbiting. Do you know, I was just also thinking, hopefully when people go back to the office, what else will improve is the state of the kitchen and people putting their stuff back in the dishwasher. Hey?
Well, there you are. See, you're looking at it from an office management point of view, Hannah. Right,
we'll see. That's a miracle, though, isn't it? Really, not pure a miracle.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Doubt it. People are commenting. Okay, super. Thank you so much, Alan. I think that's been a really useful update. And, you know, we're not saying we have all the answers. We're, you know, no one does, essentially. We're floating some ideas and information and stories about what we do, what we've seen, and, you know, some of the better practices that Alan's seen, you know, in his field, in his area of expertise. So hopefully that's been helpful to everybody. Does anybody have any questions or want to pop on to say hello and tell us any stories about anything, any chats? Does anyone want to talk about what to do if there's an outbreak of COVID? Anyone planning any openings up soon? Throwing all sorts out there, but if you're all good and done, then you're free to go if you want to. But it'd be great to hear from you and find out where everyone's up to. Do you recommend wearing masks in office? No, ultimately, it's the same with, to a degree, with temperature checks. Right, it's difficult. I mean, people, I think that's why the temperature checks are a good thing to have in place, particularly if you've got a lot of people in at once, because you are putting those layers in, right? Going back to that net theory, it's another way to catch stuff. And what we did, and I think it's in one of our policies on the portal, in one of the templates in there, that there is a bit in brackets, which is, if you want to wear a mask, you're welcome to, and we encourage you to do so when you're in meetings. So when you're in a close confined space with somebody, if you're going to be in there for more than 15 minutes and you can't increase the fresh air supply. So remember, and it's on the adverts at the moment as well, right, from the government. If you've heard them on the radio, on the TV, they say open windows. If you've got visitors round, like the guy painting a wall or sorting out your plumbing or whatever it might be, open your windows. So that is one of the other controls you can put in place, is to increase your fresh air supply through open windows, or talking to your engineering team about increasing fresh air through your air conditioning system, because the chances are it will run through that. So yeah, so I think in our policy we've put in there about mask wearing is optional, not compulsory. And I think you would get an awful lot of resistance, and I think you would be looking at some legal ramifications if you started to try and enforce that. So I think you almost need to be seen to be sitting on the fence there, completely and concretely on the fence, to say it's up to you. We're not encouraging it, we're not discouraging it. Like, if you want to wear a mask, feel free, and if you as a company want to supply those masks, completely up to you. But by you having these rules, you know, don't come in if you feel unwell, full stop. If you feel unwell, if you've got a bit of a cold, if you've got a sore throat, if you've got a headache, don't come to work. People can work from home. So what's the point in somebody taking that risk? You know, you can see all the latest symptoms, particularly for this new strain. Headaches, one of them, feeling really tired. There's some other things, I can find the link and share it. But yeah, people shouldn't be coming to work if they feel unwell, particularly at the moment. Do you agree, Alan?
Most certainly, yeah. I think also with masks, it's quite contentious, because if you look at the areas where infection is greatest, third or second is supermarkets. The vast majority of people wear masks in supermarkets. Don't get me wrong, lots of people touch stuff, and that's most probably where the problem lies, within supermarkets, because we all do it. No one wears gloves, and people go in, touch a product, pick it up, whether it's packaged or whether it's loose. But also, people wear masks day in, day out, the same one, and they become ineffective, because once they become moist, and those blue disposable ones, once they become moist, they're not particularly effective after that. And so I think, as much as anything, the government have insisted on masks because of the PR as much as anything. You know, they are effective to a certain extent, and it's more from the spread as it is from catching it. But that's another story for another day. But yeah.
That's why they say on these adverts as well, you know, you can take you can take a lot if you delve into what they're saying through these adverts and their campaigns. You can take a lot from that as your guidance for when you come back to the office, and try and mirror that and push that down to your policies to a degree. So when they say in their campaigns, the first thing you should do when you get back home from going out, even if it's just for exercise, is wash your hands. And the same thing should apply in offices. You should be encouraging people to sanitize or wash their hands if you've got the ability to put a sink at your door, essentially, as soon as they get into the offices. So all these kind of practices that we're having to follow in our personal lives are logical, sensible things that we should be encouraging and expecting people to do. And I'm saying that for a reason, because someone's asked a question on this sort of thing when they come back into the office. And yeah, so in answer to that, no, it's not recommended for people to wear them in the office unless they want to. So it's completely their decision. But I would definitely put something in your policies about that, so that you have mentioned it, but you're not seen to be pushing it either way. It's not compulsory. It's up to you. And if you want to go that step further, we encourage you to wear it if you're in a small space, in a meeting that's going to last for more than 15 minutes.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Alex has asked a question. Are you aware of any courses that office staff can go on and get a qualification? I mean, Hannah, that's really more for you, I'd say.
Yeah, so do you know what? I have actually seen some, Alex, and I can't remember where or what. So leave that with me if that's okay, and I'll do a bit of digging, because I did see something, I'm sure, when I was researching for the office management course. I'm sure I saw something pop up there. And I feel like Courses 123, who are our training providers on the portal, who do e-learning, I feel like they've done something on this as well. It's more, I think, about a little bit about the risk assessment and some sensible measures, almost like, coming from a safely managing health and safety perspective, like your IOSH managing safely. It's coming at it from that perspective, like you're the one that's managing it. So leave that with me, and I'll come back on the email after this with Alan's slides to answer that, if that's okay, because I'm sure I have seen some bits.
Nick V, do you think desks close to each other, sat opposite each other or next to each other, should have screens between them? I mean, right at the beginning of all this, there was every man and his dog was creating screens and trying to sell screens. It was a bit of a knee-jerk reaction. Everybody was on the...
Every company that had nothing to do with making screens, plant companies and everything, so, started making screens.
Yeah, I think the jury's out on that, Nick. I think, obviously, if you're directly opposite someone and you can restrict the risk of infection by putting something in front of them, then that's fine. But they don't go in straight lines. In fact, it'll go all over the place. It'll go round screens. It can go over. It can go. So it's not completely effective. And I wouldn't hold too much on that, really. But that's my opinion on that.
Yeah, I think thinking of our environmental and our sustainability factor here, you want to probably take that into account to a degree, because they're quite wasteful. The cost, they're not cheap. I know there's some alternatives out there now, but if you're looking at every desk, I know some people that spent upwards of £30,000, screening their office. It's another thing to have a discussion about internally. There is no necessarily right or wrong answer there. Again, in my office of these 17 odd people, we haven't, because we've measured our desks, and actually it's like 1.9 meters apart where someone's sitting to where someone else is sitting. And then in between, we've got the normal desk screens, the sort of half, a foot high or whatever they are. I think they're about 1.5 foot high. And then we've got double or treble monitors in between. So we've decided, no, we're not going to get these extra screens in place for the opposites. And we don't have people sitting next to each other just because of the setup of the desk and the shifts. So I would say the best thing, if you can, is to configure the office in a way that you have every other desk empty for those where you're sitting next to each other, and you do some sort of shifts. When people go back to the office, we're seeing this whole demand for working from home and flexible working increase. So it's probably worth looking at that as an alternative that will definitely be cheaper. I'm just going to go back up because we've had a few other questions we've missed. So have you any advice on how to deal with staff who don't follow the rules? So this is why I mentioned about that expectation and this policy. So within your policy, you should have something detailed. And again, I'm quite sure it's in our policy templates in there about contractor ones and staff. And ultimately, yes, if you explicitly put down rules about social distancing and covering your, I mean, there's a degree of things you can't, you know, come at someone for, but there's a degree of things you can. So if someone is deliberately and continually flouting the rules, not social distancing, which is making other people uncomfortable, just like if somebody was doing something regardless of COVID that was part of your rules, that was part of your employee handbook, and that, you know, they were swearing constantly and actually that's making people uncomfortable, whatever it is, you can discipline them. There is some guidance on that, I believe, on the ACAS website, I think, about this kind of thing as well. I'm sure I put a tip on it, but let me take that away and I'll send that link around. But yeah, it's involving HR or your external HR advisor in that area to say, we've got someone who is continually, persistently disobeying these rules and it seems deliberate, and you know, you've got to have conversations, warning letters, that kind of thing, and probably pushing them to work from home, which might not be ideal. Do you recommend for staff to have a COVID test before coming into the office? So I think that goes back to the lateral flow option there, Cheryl. I mean, to be honest, it's going to be expensive, as Alan said. So his company, I think you said you do it every week, right? You capture everybody every week. Yeah. But again, it's something to consider with your risk assessment. So I had a COVID test yesterday just because we've had a bit of a cough cold lately and it's just a bit of a sore throat. And I said to my partner, I'm just going to go. We're literally 2-minute drive from one of the test drive-through centres. And the result came in at 2 in the morning. I think my test was like at 11 yesterday. So you have got to you bear in mind that time lag there. And as people start to go back out again, we're going to see, I expect the schools opening up. Certainly when we saw that happen, the test centres just went through the roof, right? The Southend one at Chalk Street, Allen, was packed. So you need to consider how that will work, because at the point of someone being tested, between then the lag in getting the results, did they get it in between, and therefore it might show a negative test, but actually they've caught it since then. Do you know what I mean? So it's considering all of those things about enforcing that kind of rule and how you would manage that, how would you would evidence that. And I think you're probably looking at some data protection issues and employment law issues there if you're forcing people to go through that process. So that needs to be considered carefully. So I don't necessarily recommend it. Doing something like Alan's doing, where you're doing a lateral flow test and sweeping that up, and we're seeing a lot more about that from councils coming out. You can buy them privately, as Alan is at the moment, if it's not being offered by the government. That might be the best way to do it. In relation to the mask wearing, do we need to carry out a personal risk assessment for each person? If they're wearing a mask or everybody full stop, let me know on that one and I'll try and answer. In regards to personal risk assessments or an individual risk assessment, I would definitely risk assess anybody who is coming back who you know sits in that high category field, that higher risk, the more vulnerable field. They should have obviously had their vaccines by now. If they are genuinely in the high risk category, they should have had their vaccines. At least the first round, and I believe second round they're starting to go through now. So it should be okay, but I would definitely risk assess them either as a group or as individuals and start to detail how you're making sure that they're safe. You know, they have had the vaccine, tick, you know, and we've evidenced that or whatever. All under the data protection laws as well, and making sure you're keeping any medical records safely guarded with HR. And you only keep them for as long as you need to. It is an ongoing process, absolutely. Any courses? So yeah.
Sally's asked a question. Well, she's made a statement, but basically she said she's concerned about tube travel. She's quite worried about that, which is very understandable. But if I can just say to Sally, I know that the London Transport for London are actually sanitise every night. They electrostatic all the tubes, all the trains. They used to use Zuno up until the summer, and then they changed to another product. I can't remember what it's called, but I know they are doing that. So to be fair to them, they're doing that. But I guess if you're still worried about things like that, and it's going to be a risk, because it's not so much the surfaces. That's one thing that they're taking care of. It's going to be the social distancing on tube travel, or any sort of travel. So yeah, that's why I think things like getting tested and controlling it on site is another further measure you can put in place to mitigate risk.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's that government document for contact centres and offices is really quite thorough. And as I said, the templates we've got on the portal, if you're not an enhanced member, you can buy them on pay as you go, and some of them are like £5, £10, something like that. So it is worth having a look if you haven't got something in place, or if you have and you want a bit of a sanity check on what we've put out there, because it does talk about things like this. And I believe I've got something either in draft to go out or already put out there on what to do if you get an outbreak in your office as well, and a bit of a policy on that. So that might be worth looking at. But yeah, you need to take all this kind of stuff into account. You know, if you're sending someone home because they've got a high temperature, or you're doing a lateral flow test and it comes out positive and you send them home, how are you going to send them home? You know, are you going to put them on public transport the way that they came in, or are you going to order a private taxi for them? Or if you're doing that, you've got to declare to the driver. You know, all these things, it is complex. There is no right answer. It all just needs some consideration, and that's where your risk assessment really is the key document to start with. Consider that, and then don't start with your policy. You'll get lost. Start with your risk assessment. It's more bulleted, it's easier to digest, and then you can pull policies from that. The biggest pain for us is a 2-meter rule, excuse me. How do you account for this, i.e. safe desk, etc., but then limited on numbers of staff that can come in? Yeah, I mean, excuse me, I don't know, Alan, whilst I'm having a little bit of a cough, do you want to maybe tackle that one?
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge. You can't create, if you've got 1,000 square foot of space, that's what you've got. The only way you can change that is either introduce some sort of one-way system, if that's possible. If not, you then need to change the configuration around that. Or some companies are actually creating more shifts, so people are coming in at different times, and it's like a lot of things. You get used to, oh, well, we start at 9 and we finish at 5:30. You know, so a lot of companies now, to help with this particular problem, are splitting down their people. So working from home 2 days, working in the office 3 days, having a shift start at 8, having a shift start at 4. There are ways around it. To what you're looking to do, if you've got a challenge there, is minimise the amount of people at any one time within your working environment. And if you can do that and consider those points that I've just mentioned, then yeah, take it from there. But or you start looking at changing furniture and stuff like that, but that then comes costly.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's looking, it's, you know, I would almost have a bubble, right? You know, like these old spidergrams, and just start jotting ideas down and sort of challenge, you know, almost be your own devil's advocate, challenge yourself, like what if, and cost and so on, and just start scribbling stuff down on an old-fashioned pen and paper to establish what your options are versus what your sensible approaches are, and what the risks are, and how it will reduce them and so on. Just really start to scribble that down. I mean, the other thing that schools, you know, taking how they've approached this kind of stuff, and my son's nursery, is they're in bubbles. So you could look to create bubbles possibly with groups of staff. So if you've got a bank of 6 desks, for example, and you can't socially distance them, you don't want to get screens in place, do you look at bubbles? So, you know, they're in a they're in a bubble. You know, and they have to work as a bubble in the sense that they have to declare if they've come into contact with anybody that's got COVID and all that kind of stuff. And then if that bubble is infected, all of them have to work from home and isolate for the 10 days. And, you know, there are a lot of options here, which almost makes it more complex for us. But in a way, it's a case of looking at all these tools and think about what your hairdresser does. Think about what the supermarkets do. Think about you know, what other shops and businesses are doing, and learn from them. Learn the goods and the bads, right? You've probably seen some stuff in your supermarkets where you think, that's not a sensible system at all, that doesn't work, or no one's socially distancing here. They did have one-way signs in the early days, and like I know our Waitrose blocked the aisles off in the early days, so you could only go in and out, and you literally had to walk round and you couldn't get to the end. But now they've taken that away, and I don't know why. So, look at all these sensible options and measures and discount the ones that you think are not crazy, and try and then factor those in and churn them into things that might work in your office. So hopefully that helps there, Vicky. What about a pregnancy risk assessment? We've got a question on that in relation to COVID. So in all of our risk assessments that we do for pregnant staff or women, we don't really generally have men that come in and pregnant. We need to include a sort of infectious diseases section in there. So looking at measles and German measles, and chickenpox, and making sure that they've either been inoculated against it, or if there is an outbreak in your office and individuals contracted those, that HR are aware, and then the pregnant person is told and then probably sent home just until such time that and you would probably go through some disinfection measures and things as well. But that's quite an old hat piece that should be in your risk assessment for pregnant people. So you almost want to just extend that to count for COVID. I think a pregnancy risk assessment should always be done in consultation with that individual. So it's not a case of having a generic risk assessment and that applies to everybody. You've got to have the conversation with them to find out, how are they traveling in? Are they wearing their baby badge to make sure that they get a seat, particularly as they get heavier? But also, if they are traveling on the tubes and underground, are they wearing a mask, and are they changing that mask, like Alan said? I heard something, Alan, actually, I don't know if you've heard about this, but the ones with the filters on that almost make them look like Darth Vader, that kind of one, that people aren't cleaning them. And someone, there was a case not that long ago, sort of late end of last year, someone caught Legionnaires from it. Did you hear about that?
No, I didn't, but it doesn't surprise me.
No. So be aware, if you've got them, or your partners have, or family, just be aware that the filter should be cleaned, because otherwise you're trapping bacteria in there, and that in certain temperatures, as we know, can cause Legionnaire's disease. So be aware of those, everybody. But just hopefully that helps with that question. But I would definitely include it in consultation and find out what they're doing. Do they want to come in a couple of days a week and stay at home the rest of the time? And how can you make their journey safer, and if at all, and what alternative measures are there that you can put in place to protect them? Because it's not just that individual, it's their unborn baby that you need to take into account as well. Anything else on that one, Alan?
No, that's fine.
Sorry, we're running a bit over. So last question, and then we'll wrap up. So do you recommend, we've already answered that one, sorry, that one's been done, about the COVID test again. Okay, perfect. I think that's everything answered then. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining, and I hope that was useful. We'll shoot the recording round, and I will do some research. I'm just going to quickly copy the chat. I'll do some research on these questions that we've had about the courses and the other bits and pieces there. But if anyone's got any other follow-up questions, just reach out to Alan. They're a cleaning and security company, so he has all sorts of contacts and support available if you need it. And yeah, we're here. So, and fingers crossed, who knows when we'll open up, but we'll help you wherever we can to get that confidence back. Thank you, Alan. Really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Good to see everyone. I didn't see everyone, but good.
Good for them to see you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny old world, isn't it? Right, take care, everybody. Stay safe. We'll see you soon. Nice to see you, Alan.
Bye, everyone. Bye.